So effective immediately, we're extending the emergency declaration and prolonging the stay-at-home order province-wide for an additional 2 weeks, for a total of 6 weeks.
I could have stayed open for my financial gain because I didn't agree with these lockdowns. I didn't think they were justified, mostly because of the data that was already there to state that I was a safe place to be. But I closed because I thought that was the right thing to do.
Hey guys, what's up? Tabitha Peters here for Rebel News. I'm standing inside of 9 Round, which is a kickboxing fitness gym here in Bradford, Ontario. 9 Round is a franchise, and I'm about to speak with the owner of this location in Bradford, Ontario, Marina Imperio, and who has been asking the government to do what they promised: help small business owners who are still suffering from accumulated debt that is built up from lockdowns during the pandemic. Let's hear what she has to say.
I had 2 locations, one here in Bradford and one in Aurora. My one in Aurora was forced to close because the landlord no longer wanted to work with us, as we still were striving to reach financial recovery. The problem that myself in the fitness industry and many of the small businesses were still struggling financially. Having been shut down 15 months over the last 2.5 years, having had 12 months of restrictions placed upon our business over 2.5 years, there is no way that we could possibly reach financial recovery to be able to start paying back all the debt that's accumulated since COVID started in 2020.
According to the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, small businesses are continuing to feel uncertain about the future. Half, which is 56%, are yet to return to their normal levels of revenue. And small firms are still carrying an average of $144,000 of pandemic debt amid rising interest rates and inflationary pressures. Explain to me the process and how you lost the Aurora location.
So it all started with being closed with not enough funding to support the closure. The problem that we've had, especially in the fitness industry, is that we had zero income coming in when we were closed. Even though the government did support us, it was never 100% support. So if I received 80% of my rent in subsidy or 70% of my wage subsidies from the government, there were still that rest of that percentage that needed to be accounted for. And when I'm making zero revenue during closure, that debt started to accumulate.
We put in place some of the toughest public health measures anywhere in the country. We need to do everything in our power to protect this summer for all Ontarians. My goal is to have the most normal July and August possible. Obviously, that won't mean large sporting events or concerts, but if we manage the next few weeks properly, I believe that we can have things in a very good place this summer. To do so, we need to keep driving cases down and easing the pressure on our hospitals. We need to maintain the stay-at-home order and all public health measures until at least June the 2nd.
It got to the point 2.5 years later that I was behind in rent in Aurora $80,000. Now, I was working with the landlord. They had discounted my rate to help me through my financial recovery, and we were supposed to sit down together in September to discuss a repayment plan. But instead of doing that, they slapped me with a notice saying, if you don't pay us back the entire amount, you're out in 15 days. And there's no way I can come up with that amount, so I had to vacate.
Quebec is apparently looking at a larger shutdown for the 2 weeks after Christmas. Is this something that's being talked about for Ontario?
Yeah, I saw the same numbers this morning, and it is concerning when we get into those percentages. And I guess what I can say, and I know I've said it throughout this whole pandemic, but really everything's on the table. Our number one priority is to protect the health and safety of the people of Ontario.
I also interviewed Mark Liebert, who is the co-owner of Liebert Fitness Nation, and he told me about the struggles that his gym had to endure during lockdown time.
Financially, it's been a struggle. We were hitting our stride before COVID, being closed for 2 years. It's going to be real tough to recoup from that. As I said earlier, we accrued more debt. The loans were there just to pay the landlords to keep us shut down, which is ridiculous. We went online and we trained people online, which, you know, honestly, some people like it. I hate it. It's brutal. It's not the same. We're here, community and training together. So it'll be a tough grind. But like everything we do in fitness, it makes you stronger. And we're a strong community here, and we're going to survive.
So the government promised to small business owners $10,000 grants every time we closed to help with operating costs, rents, utilities, etc. What happened in my case? I have 2 different locations. They classified me as one entity because I'm a single owner of 2 different businesses. So I never qualified for grants at this location. So I had to split the grant between both locations. My rent is $6,600 a month. So if I had to split that grant between 2 locations, I wasn't even making rent, let alone franchise fees, licensing fees, utilities, etc.
Explain to me how this affected your members and the memberships and people coming in and showing their support. How did it affect them, and how did it affect you as a business owner?
Well, during the lockdown, we had a lot of members who were scared, and a lot of members who would cancel their memberships because they thought this was an environment that wasn't safe, even though the data showed that we were the sector that had the least amount of spread. And there's also decades of data that shows that exercise boosts immunity. But every time we closed down, every time there was a restriction put in place, that stigma of being unsafe was placed upon us. So when I reopened, I was not only rebuilding membership, but I was rebuilding consumer confidence to say, hey, we are a safe place. If there is a virus going around, this is where you should be to help you get healthy and help you fight it. We weren't utilized the way we should have during this pandemic, but instead we were vilified and we were always shut down. And I think that was a big mistake. What really pisses me off right now is that, we were forced to close and big corporations weren't, right? Big box stores, Home Depot open, Costco open, Walmart open, Amazon open. But my little studio that has no more than 10 people in it had to close. If this was really about public health, then everybody would have closed, right? If this was really about keeping the numbers down, then the big box stores would have had to close their doors, and then the little guy could have been open. All small businesses could have serviced the needs of everyone being open and having the bigger guys close, but that wasn't the case. And that's what really pisses me off. There were winners and there were losers in this pandemic. The winners made millions in the last 2 years, and the losers are people like me who are facing bankruptcy. The last thing I want to ask, and this message is going out to Doug Ford himself, you need to help the small business owner. It was you who shut us down during the last 2.5 years. It was you who determined the amount of money that was given to us while we were shut down. And it's you who is going to be the one that is going to save the small businesses now. You keep saying that small businesses are the backbone of Ontario. I need you to prove it, because if you don't help, that backbone is going to break. And when the backbone breaks, the body becomes crippled. And that's something I don't want to happen in Ontario. We cannot afford to have Ontario crippled because of lack of funding for the small business owner.
What would happen if this location, you ended up having to file for bankruptcy? What would happen to you as a business owner? Do you have a backup plan, or this is everything for you right now?
If I had to lose this one too, I would have to declare bankruptcy because the debt load of both locations is too high. But the problem with small business owners who declare bankruptcy, we have to personally sign our leases. So we're responsible personally. So what happens is that it would affect me personally, which means I would have to declare bankruptcy, which means I may lose my home. I may lose everything. because there's no support for me. I'm not a corporation. I'm a person who wanted to make a difference in people's lives by opening up these locations and keeping people healthy. But instead, I'm looking at losing everything, because there was no government support great enough to support the lockdowns that were imposed upon us.
Can you assure Ontarians that we are not going to experience again those widespread lockdowns that we've had for the past year and a half?
Yeah, well, I'll assure you, as long as we hit those numbers, I can't stand lockdowns. I followed the chief medical officer's advice, the science table's advice throughout this whole thing, and I understand it was challenging. But, the proof is in the pudding. Right now, we're leading the world in first vaccinations, almost 80% of 79.8. We'll probably hit 80% today or tomorrow. Second doses, we're at 60%. We will hit our target of 75%. And I just encourage everyone, please get out there and get vaccinated. But we're going in the right direction. Nothing in this pandemic is 100%. That'd be 99% because, again, everyone's worked hard. Healthcare folks worked hard, the people of Ontario, and we just can't go back. We have to go forward. We just can't afford another lockdown. Just can't afford it.
I could have stayed open for my financial gain because I didn't agree with these lockdowns. I didn't think they were justified, mostly because of the data that was already there to state that I was a safe place to be. But I closed because I thought that was the right thing to do. I wanted to protect my community because that's what was expected of me. But in turn, that ended up being the biggest mistake because now there's no support for me, and now I'm gonna lose everything because I was doing the right thing. But there are people that didn't do that. The big corporations, they got to run their businesses without these restrictions. Other big corporations got bailouts from the government when they had to close. What did I get? I got not enough funding. I got a federal loan that I have to pay back regardless if I declare bankruptcy or not. And for what? To find out 2.5 years later that this pandemic wasn't as bad as it was first presented, the numbers weren't as great as they once were projected, that really upsets me.
Could I go out there and be the only politician in the entire country, including the Prime Minister, all premiers, every single mayor, because I've talked to the vast majority of them, and say, okay, docs, I'm not a medical professional, but I'm going to disagree with you. When I said I'm going to follow their direction on health advice right from day one. And then if I did that, they could slap a Section 22 down, and it's just friction. I'm going to stick with what I've done right from the beginning. I'm going to stick with health and science and work with them collaboratively. But I'm going to be very frank. There's no politician in this country who's going to disagree with their chief medical officer. They just aren't going to do it. They might as well throw a rope around their neck and jump off a bridge. They're done.
What really upsets me is that I have been interviewed by so many news sources, CP24, CTV, Global News, and I have been saying the same thing for 2.5 years. The small business owner is in trouble. We are struggling. We are facing bankruptcy.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Unfortunately, small businesses are still struggling due to the aftermath of having shut down during the pandemic. To bring awareness to this matter, please sign our petition at lockdownamnesty.com to take a stand against our government's mandates.